There is two more things that I want to cover before we start building out something, a super simple project here, before we move on to the media queries and making mobile friendly things and then building out those three nice projects. So what I want to cover is positioning things. And let's go into our HTML here. What I did, I just added a div with a class and container and three boxes inside. So what I want to do is style them a bit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get that container like this, container, perfect. And I'm just going to add a dark background color so we can see this. And I want to show you a few cool new tricks in CSS that we can do. So background, I'll just add a color like this and I'll change it afterwards. So as you can see right now, we cannot see anything. And the reason why we cannot see anything is because we don't have any content in our body. So if your content is empty, then you're not going to see any background color. As soon as we start adding something to it, so maybe I drop in a H1 here, you're going to see that background is going to appear. And the reason why this happens is because by default, we cannot see the HTML or the body, because as long as there's no content in it, the height is not going to be set. So we can change that. That's okay. So if we want to see something here, what we can do is we can add a width that we can see. So if I had 100% here, well, we still cannot see because we don't have any height. So the interesting thing is, if I try to set a height to this of 100% to take up the full screen, we cannot see anything. And again, that's the reason why, because we have no content here and the body is set to, it doesn't have a height. So when you try to set a height of 100% of nothing, then nothing's gonna happen. So a quick fix for this is gonna be to take the HTML and the body and just add a height of 100% to it. And that's gonna stretch all the way down here. Okay, and now if I change the height of the container to something like 50%, then it's gonna take 50% of the height of the body. Now we're gonna look at a better solution than this when we get to responsive media with VH and VW. You're gonna see that. It's gonna be more fun. Okay, but for now we're gonna set it like this, which is completely fine. So I actually want this to be around, let's do 80%, and the width, let's also do 80% on the width. Okay, so something like that. Now what if I want to center this in the middle? There's a cool trick that you can do with margin. If we set margin to auto, it's automatically gonna allocate the space on the left side and on the right side. It's gonna split up the remaining width here, so 10% and 10%, and it's gonna drop it on the left and on the right. So whenever you want to take a div or a container or some sort and you want to position it in the middle, you can do a margin auto as long as your width is smaller than 100%, because if it's 100%, then it's going to take up the whole screen. Okay, so let's do something here with the boxes. I'm going to take box 1, box 2, and comma box 3, so I can select all of them and add a width to them. So I can do 20% and a height of 20%. Like this, I hit save. Okay, now if I go down here, I can add a background color to all of them. I can do background. Let's do something intense like this. Amazing. And what I can do now is just select box 2 and just change the background color. So the reason why I did this was so I don't duplicate these settings over and over again. So we change the background color there. Let's change it here as well. So let's do something like an intense blue. All right, these colors make me sad. I don't like the way they look. I want to make them obvious, but I don't want them to make your eyes hurt. So let's also take box 3 here and add a background. Let's try a green color. Not dark gray. Shall we do a dark one? Let's do a dark one. There we go. Let's do green. Poor green has, there we go, or like an ocean color, and the red can leave as well with a nice pink, purple. Okay, there we go. Some new colors there for you. So let's take a look at these positions. What are positions? How do we apply them? What do they do? Let's try it with the box. Let's try it with the box 1. Okay, the first one, the purple, lovely box. So what happens if I add, by default, all elements are positioned static, like this. And as you can see, it says the box is a normal box laid according to the normal flow. All right, so the way we basically added the elements in our HTML, that's the way they're positioned. So it's static. So if I add some content in here, if I add a H1, blah, 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 hit save. So they're just going with the normal flow of the HTML, okay? So nothing really special. However, if I change the position static, so as you can see, nothing happens, to position absolute, let's say absolute, what's gonna happen is that this element is gonna be ripped out of the normal document flow. You can think of it as we literally just take out the element and it doesn't care about where it is in the position anymore. So what happened, it's a bit hard to see, but as soon as we add this, these two get pushed up. All right, so it's kind of like this doesn't exist anymore. So it's kind of like we grab this out of here and these other boxes just get pushed up because it's like, oh, I have empty space, I shouldn't be down here, so they get pushed up. So if I hit save, this gets taken out and those elements get pushed up. And now we have access to 4 new properties called top, left, bottom, and right. And what happens if we add these? So let's try. What if I do bottom, 0 rem? Hit save. As you can see, it gets stuck at the bottom of the page here. Okay? What happens if I add left, 0? We can even say 0 pixels, that's fine. It gets stuck to the left here. Now, as you can see, these got pushed up here and it doesn't care about this box that it was in. You can imagine like it doesn't care about anything. It gets ripped out of the page and it just sits where you want it to sit. So 0 basically means here, left 0, basically 0 pixels away from the left side of the screen here. So if I move this around, as you can see, it's 0. If I add some pixels here, or let's do rem, 1 rem, it's gonna have 10 pixels from the left. If I wanna push it up a bit, I can do 1 rem from the bottom. So there we go. So it's very easy to position this kind of the way you want. Maybe I want it top and kind of down here. So I can do top and right, hit save, and now it's here. And maybe I want to push it down. Let's do 20. There we go. So I can move this anywhere I want. What if I want to center this here? Well, we can also use percentages. Now something's weird is going to happen. So I'm going to add 50% and hit save. And as you can see, this doesn't look in the middle for some reason. And it actually is in the middle, but I want to explain this, kind of how this works. So if we look from up here all the way down in the center here, what this is the center, this is where the element starts. So this is where it puts it. But right now the content, so the box, actually has some height to it and width to it, right? So 20%. So obviously it's gonna go a bit down, right? And it doesn't look centered. So what we want to do, it would be really cool if we would have a property that would take just this element, just this purple thing, take this and just move it up by half. So just the size of this and take half of it and push it up. And there is actually a property that can do that, which is called translate, transform translate, okay? So let's do that, but before we do that, let's move the right one to 50% as well, 50%. As we can use something called transform translate, all right? And you can move the X and the Y, or optionally, you can do translate like this, and you can add 2 values. With translate X, you would add 1 value here, so like minus 50%, and with no value here, you can add 2 X and Y. So we can say X and Y, minus 50, minus 50. And as you can see, that's gonna move it perfectly in the center. So let me illustrate that translate even up here so it's a bit easier to see. If I add to the box to a transform, and let's just translate X. If I move this by 100%, then it's gonna perfectly move it the size of the box to the right. Okay, if I want to do the opposite way, I can say minus, and there we go. Also, what we did here was just do 50% because I wanted the element to be centered. So like this, as you can see, perfectly moved 50% to the left and upwards, so it's centered. Okay, let's get rid of this. And I want to show you something else. So this is how you can position it perfectly in the middle. You add top 50, left 50, and then you transform, translate it back by minus 50 and minus 50. Okay, but what if I want this to be relative to the... All right, let me get rid of this. Let's just move this top to 0%. There we go, and let's move it to the right, 0%. What if I want this to be relative to the box? Okay, I don't want this to be out here. I want it to stick basically to this box. So to do that, all you have to do is, if you have a box 1 here, if you add position relative to the parent element or any parent you want to add, this is going to basically detect the first position relative you're going to add to a parent. So it can be either this one or this one. It's going to detect it the first time it hits position relative on an element. That's what it is going to stick to. So if I go here and add a position relative and hit save, as you can see now it constrains itself to the thing that we added relative. So you can imagine it as, okay, I have position absolute, but what am I relative to? Am I relative to this? And if it is, then you just add position relative. So now if I change this to top 0, as you can see it's there, I can modify this to bottom 0, and you're going to see that it's going to be stuck there perfectly fine. So now everything works the same way. It's just that everything is stuck in here. Okay. Now what position relative also does is, if we go to box 2 here and add a position relative, all right, now this is not going to jump in there because it's not its parent, right? It's just going to look at parents. These are kind of siblings in here. So it's just going to look up there when you add the position absolute. But if you just add position relative to an element, all it's going to mean is that if we move this with top, left, right, and bottom, it's going to move away from this exact position. So it's going to keep count of where its initial position is. And then if we just add something like left 20 rem, all right, it's going to move 20 rem from its original position. Okay, so let me show you a 1 rem. So it's going to move left 1 rem from its original position. Okay, so that's very simple actually. Relative just moves from its original position. Okay, and the next one I want to show you is position static. Let's go to the dark box here. We're going to add position static. My apologies, position fixed, because static is the one it has. And what happens right now is we cannot really see anything. But if I go up here and I just change the body and the height to like 200, just so we can scroll a bit, as you can see, what happens is that this element stays fixed. All right, and I can scroll as much as I want and I can position it wherever I want. It's always going to be fixed there. Now I can modify its position, its fixed position. So I can say top, let's do 2 rem and see what happens there. So it's here. Maybe I want to move it left 10 rem. And again, I can add percentages here just like the other ones. Let's do 5 rem more. 10 rem you want? Oh, even more. This is not enough. 20 rem. Okay, so I can position it the way I want and I can scroll and it's always gonna stay there. Okay, and even if I go outside, it doesn't matter where I go, it's always gonna be fixed. Okay, so that is fixed. You might be using this if you have maybe some kind of chat or something, or maybe a footer or a nav that's always stuck up there. That's where you can use this. So maybe you have your content, but you have a nav. So we can even add height and width to this. So I can stretch this out with 100% if I want, hit save. All right, and then let's move the left to 0. So I'm gonna say 0%, like that. And top is gonna be 0%. And close this up. And there we go. You can imagine this as being your navigation, and it's always there. Well, it wouldn't be so thick, but you get the general idea. Okay, so that's the one. Now there's another one I want to show you, which is called position sticky. So let's remove everything from here. And we are back to this. And let's change back the size to 100. All right. Actually, I need a bit more height here, so I'm going to add 200. Even though these are kind of stretched, we can kind of fix this if we want. If we go to the boxes and change the height to 10. Okay, just make them a bit shorter. But I want to have some scrollable space here. So if I go to the box tree and add a position sticky, hit save, nothing's gonna happen. But as soon as I add top 0% and hit save, as soon as I start scrolling, as you can see, that black thing sticks there. But as soon as, that sounds weird, the black thing sticks there. But as soon as I move up, it kind of stops. So it gets sticky, and as soon as I move up, it's back to normal. So what this does, it switches from position relative to position fixed. So when we scroll down and it hits that top 0, so as soon as it hits that top 0, it's gonna stick there. All right? You can come up with some cool things here as well with this. And you can do the same thing with whenever it hits the bottom or the right or the left. Okay, so this works on all of those properties. So these are the positions. Now we're not going to be using this to exclusively align everything. So this is not how we're going to position the nav. This is not how we're going to position like the section and everything. These can be used sometimes for very specific purposes that we're going to cover when we're going to get into building out the project. That's where you're going to see exactly when and how we're going to use these. But these are very helpful and they're going to help us a ton. So now let's get into aligning and floats. And that was a super old way of aligning content and positioning content that we're not going to use, but I'm going to show it to you just for fun.